Good evening, everyone. So, just a quick update here, outside of the community. So, you're probably thinking, at what point is this going to bounce back to the upside? Because everybody was promising alt season, and here we are with reds across the board. So, this pretty much reminds me of several different periods historically when we've had kind of economic announcements and the market's been really reactive, and then that reaction initially completely phases out, and you get a move into the next leg of what will be, in this case, monetary policy change on the interest rates side. So on Ethereum and Bitcoin right now, what you're kind of seeing is what appears to be quite a major sell-off. But if you just zoom out a little bit, just ignore the doodles um, on the actual chart. So what you're kind of seeing is pretty aggressive moves from this area here. Aggressive move, pretty major sell-off. Huge moves, quite a major sell-off again. Huge moves and sell-off. Now, each of these times kind of feels like, well, how low are we actually going to go? Most of these moves to the downside I did call. What one area which I kind of that flung me a little bit was this explosive move out of here. I kind of expected it to come up and get a bit of a rejection around here, and a similar situation here. Expected to get a little bit of rejection, but each time it's got such strong momentum. The big difference that we'll have here compared to kind of the April period of all the tariffs and so on is we're actually starting to see a major change in policy, both on the monetary policy side and the fiscal policy side. So you have the one big beautiful bill, which has came into play, which is pretty much when we started getting this move to the upside here. And you're starting to see the economic data kind of actually rearing its head now and showing its real weakness, even though those who are like inside of my Discord and some who probably follow us on X as well will understand that that's something I've been preaching for a long, long time, that monetary policy will be backed into a corner where, regardless of what happens with inflation, the economic data will push it into a corner where it has to kind of like fight back. And it's going to fight back by dropping interest rates during what will more than likely be in a rally within inflation. So this time it's different. We're starting to see more than likely an end to QT. We're going to see rates getting dropped, and the rates will be getting dropped alongside the one big beautiful bill, which is essentially stimulus. We've also had the central bank digital currency thing being blocked off, and like I say, anybody who's previously followed what I kind of truly believe to be the next step is a fiscal policy token, which will be backed alongside the dollar by treasuries. That will what in my thesis was USGT, and that will essentially be the next point in where people can't afford groceries, people can't afford to buy basic living essentials, and this will then step in for electricity bills and so on, and it'll be some form of universal basic income. But what we're kind of seeing on these moves here is everybody kind of starting to panic about these moves. And what you actually have on Bitcoin and Ethereum are two levels here, which, in terms of satisfying a chart, you really want to see getting hit. So you've got this level here, which I've got my little box in, and you've got this level here. Ideally, you see this get hit. This getting hit with this perfect X crossover. And just for reference, for those who don't follow on X or who also aren't inside the community, an X crossover is when you have two key trend lines crossing over, creating a level of strength. So you've got this fallen trend line here, and you've got this rallying trend line here. Similar situation would be with this horizontal trend line along here. And if you just extend this out, you've got this bottom trend line here, which would create an X crossover here as well. So these levels aren't out of question. But what I want to see on, if you just ignore this, because that's not actually what I think will happen, what you want to see is kind of a bounce off there But even a bounce off there, you could kind of start getting rejections around there. Ideally, you want to see a little bit of noise bounce off here, or you get this breakdown, get a little bit of noise, comes up, breaches into this area, and from there, that's when you get your bounce. This would all kind of check out perfectly with the lead up to September's interest rate, like what happens at that point. And you're probably going to then get kind of a bounce off these levels and buy the rumor, sell the news kind of scenario. And with Ethereum, again, ignore all the stuff. That was just a video from the Discord. So with Ethereum, you also have what I like to look at is when you've got a range like this. I was just saying, ignore this bottom bit here. This was kind of massively news-led price action. So you range on Ethereum, and you've got your top here. You move back down to the bottom, back up to the top, back up to the bottom. This is probably your true test of the bottom, these two here. And then you're moving back up. So it didn't quite reach the top there, didn't quite reach the top there, but this is pretty much the top of your range. When you have a compression, so if we just kind of get some fresh stuff here. So when you get a compression like this kind of move here, so this will be your standard compression. You get some price action, and the last 20% of the compression is where you're expecting to move to the upside or you're expecting to move to the downside. That doesn't necessarily mean that'll be the direction of the overall move. You might end up coming back up, and again, you might end up coming back down. But similar within that last 20% range there, you also want to look at the 20%. This is quite difficult to work out, but you kind of have to just use a little bit of common sense. When you've been ranging for a long period of time, so this goes all the way back to March 2024 to all the way to here. So it's a long period of time. You're looking at almost 18 months of being within a range. You start to think, well, we haven't quite hit the top. Similar to this scenario here, we're probably going to come down and test the bottom of the range again. This is where it's market psychology meets technical analysis. So this area in the middle is where this bottom trend line here, this is where it should get tasty, and you should get a fall into this box here and then a push back up to the upside. So regardless of whether it actually hits that bottom bit, you want to see this center part of the range being hit. This is the trap. So it starts falling into here. Everybody thinks, well, we're going to end up testing the bottom of the range. You don't get that. You get your reversal. And then what ends up happening is you get your move back to the top of the range. More than likely you get a rejection. And as you get this rejection from the top of the range, you then break out of it in the end. But what I'm kind of solely focusing on here is getting entries into spot on Ethereum and Bitcoin around these areas. Similar with Bitcoin, if we just have a little look. So around these areas, keeping that spot with exit orders of this area here. And then once that begins to sell off, I think you'll start to see maybe a little bit of a wick above, but then a break back in. And then this is very speculative and what I would call maverick trading, but you're likely to come back down to these. And that's when I think you'll see a monstrous sell-off in alts. So around here is when I'll be shorting alts and also exiting the Bitcoin and Ethereum moves. If it breaks to the upside, nothing's really lost. You've made a solid trade, which is what you've seen before. It's kind of your average entry would be around here. Your average entry, that's probably being generous. Your average entry would probably be, say here. So you're looking at around a 19 to 20% trade from Ethereum, and Bitcoin, you're looking at probably around about 10%. Average entry, I would say here. Yeah, so you're looking around 10%. So the trap here is kind of creating that setup where everybody's expecting a collapse here, economic recession, all the buzzwords come into play. But actually what you want to be doing is you want to be doing the complete opposite of what everybody else is doing and focusing on these moves. And you can look at some of these alts all heading into key areas. And if you just look on, this is pretty much how I expect a cast to move here. Again, delete all this. So this was the target area for CAS, landing right in it. Should really see a little bit of a reversal here. And again, if you start to see little reversals, you're not out of the woods at all here until, so say you start getting a bit of a bounce off here, around these levels, not really out the woods at all. So again, it would just be likely be a trap, and you would then continue seeing further falling. So you can just go across most of them, really. Most of them are having solid pullbacks into key areas. And if you just go on to USDT, nearly called it GT there, but for me, fiscal policy theory. So this is, if you just zoom out, you're likely going to see, go on a higher time frame. And yeah, so you've got this trend line here, which is actually a higher time frame trend line once it loads. And you've got this fallen trend line. So you've got an X crossover, like we just discussed before. Why that's not loading up. There we go. Yeah, so this is a key area. So retesting this is pretty much expected, to be honest. And then a bit of a rejection, and then a bit of a cup and handle, or what I like to call a bit of a U bend, and normally you get a rejection from there. So that's when we should start to see a bounce in Bitcoin, should start to see a bounce in Ethereum, but that's only a potential temporary bounce like this move here, and then you have a continuation. So basically, a little bit lower in Bitcoin and Ethereum. I am entering in, and I will be exiting around these areas as well. So 20 to 30% moves on Ethereum, probably 8 to 12% moves on Bitcoin. And yeah, similar with CAS, be getting in this as well. Already started layering into CAS around here, and around here again. So a little bit further upside in all of them. And then just step back, reassess the situation, and then take it from there. So hope that was useful. And yeah, if you don't subscribe to this channel already, get it done, because I'll be posting a lot more on here now moving forward. So take care, everyone.